In the spring of each year from 1843 to 1847, a pattern emerged. At least 7 young women from Mississippi's richest plantation families disappeared. No one ever found them. No real searches were ever done. Their families gave excuses, saying the girls were at fine schools in Europe or had married relatives in Charleston. But hidden in the old records of Adams County, a dark leather diary reveals the truth. It tells of a treatment so harsh and carefully cruel, 3 men were ready to die to end it. This is the story of what took place in the barn at the Kellerman estate, and the reason Catherine Kellerman's body was never discovered. Before we get to the dark secret of the Kellerman plantation, I ask that you please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos. Stories like this one, the kind that people tried to bury, need to be shared. And please, tell me in the comments what state or country you are listening from. Let's see how far this hidden story can reach. The story of Catherine Kellerman's fate started with her mother's dark fixation, but it finished with a truth that would shatter the world of Mississippi's high society. In the spring of 1843, Natchez, Mississippi, was a symbol of wealth built on a polished public image. The great plantation families were rivals. They competed over who grew the most cotton and owned the most land. But they also competed over their family purity, the beauty of their daughters, and the complete power they held over their entire world. On the cliffs above the Mississippi River, huge mansions looked like white churches. Each one screamed of its owner's importance with tall columns and perfect gardens, all kept up by the hard work of many enslaved people. The Kellerman property covered almost 4,000 acres of valuable cotton land, about 15 miles from the center of Natchez. Lucinda Kellerman got the land from her father in 1831. This was unusual, and it made her rich. It also made her angry about the attention she got for being an independent woman. By age 42, she had made herself the judge of what was proper in high society. Her parties were famous for being perfect. The silverware had to shine just so. The flowers had to be set in a French style she learned on a short trip to New Orleans. She stayed painfully thin by drinking vinegar water and wearing tight corsets. This left her out of breath, but she was seen as very stylish. At 19, Catherine Kellerman was the opposite of everything her mother valued. Lucinda was bony and sharp. Catherine, however, had her late father's tendency to be heavy. In 1843, people thought she was terribly overweight. Her body would not become the thin figure her mother adored. To Lucinda, Catherine's size was not just a simple fact. She saw it as an act of defiance, a way to shame the family in public. It was a black mark on the Kellerman name that only seemed to get worse. "She eats like a common worker," Lucinda would tell her closest friends. Her voice was filled with contempt. "I have given her everything, every chance to be a high-class lady, and this is how she thanks me with this awful show of no self-control." Lucinda never talked about something she may not have even admitted to herself. Catherine's weight really started to climb after her father, Thomas Kellerman, died in 1839. The official story was that his heart failed, but the quiet rumor known by only a few was that Thomas died in his office. An empty bottle of laudanum was next to him, and he was holding a letter for Catherine. It was a letter Lucinda quickly burned before it could be read. The Kellerman plantation ran with the same harsh, effective control Lucinda wanted in her life. 237 enslaved people toiled in the cotton fields. They also worked in the main house, the gardens, and all the other buildings that made the large estate work. 3 of these men would become key parts of Catherine's story. None of them could have guessed the parts they would have to play. Joshua Fletcher was 34. He was born on the Kellerman land and had been trained as a blacksmith since he was a boy. His hands were scarred from the hammer and had a power that made him useful for any hard job. He did not say much, but he watched everything. He kept a list in his head of every terrible thing he saw, saving them like payments for a justice he hoped to see one day. The second man was Samuel Hayes. He was bought at a Natchez auction in 1841. He was 28 and had already lived through 3 owners. Each owner was more cruel than the one before. Samuel was valuable to Lucinda not just for his strength, but because he could read and write. His last owner, a failed businessman, had used Samuel to manage his books. This was a rare and very dangerous skill for an enslaved man. Lucinda found this useful. She made Samuel track the plantation's grain and animals, always keeping a close eye on him. The third was Daniel Cooper, a 16-year-old boy. He was bought from a D.N.G. plantation in Louisiana just for his youth and power. Daniel had seen such awful things in his short life that he now had a stutter. He would jump at any sudden sound or move. But he also saw things other people did not. He noticed small patterns and details that would become very important later. The barn where Catherine's story takes place was on the far east side of the property. It was a huge building, made in 1820 to hold cotton before it was shipped down the river. By 1843, a new warehouse was built near the water. The old barn was then just used for storing grain and fixing tools. It was hidden from the main house by a thick stand of oak trees. It was the perfect spot for things that needed to be kept secret. Lucinda's diary, found years later in the secret bottom of a trunk, shows the exact time her plan was born. The entry for March 15, 1843 says, "Today I saw the Ashworth girl. She used to be a heavy girl. No one would marry her. Now she is so thin and lovely. Mrs. Ashworth told me her secret. It was work, hard, non-stop physical work. The body, when pushed too far, eats itself. It burns off all the extra weight, showing the shape God wanted. Why should only the Ashworths have this cure? Why must my daughter stay as a symbol of overeating when the answer is so simple? I have the tools. I have the spot. I have the workers who will do as they're told. Catherine's change will start tomorrow." What Lucinda left out of her diary, but what became clear later, was that Margaret Ashworth's change had a high price. The girl had a cough that no doctor could fix. Her hands shook all the time. Her eyes looked empty, as if something deep inside her had broken. But she was thin. And in Lucinda Kellerman's world, that was the only thing that mattered. The social world of Natchez in 1843 ran on layers of secrets and quiet deals. Everyone knew things they acted like they didn't know. Everyone saw things they agreed they hadn't seen. This silent agreement was not passive. It was actively kept in place through careful social rules. To ask about another family's private matters was to invite questions about your own. To worry about a daughter's health was to hint that your own way of raising children might be wrong. The system protected itself. Everyone was in on it. Lucinda Kellerman had built her name on knowing and using these unwritten rules. She knew just how far she could go before it became a scandal. She knew which families would not ask questions, which doctors would sign health papers without a real exam, and which preachers would talk about the goodness of discipline without saying how it was done. On March 16, 1843, Lucinda called for Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel at the main house. It was not normal for field workers to be in the parlor. The three men stood nervously among the expensive furniture and fine china. They knew their very presence broke the careful rules that kept the Plantations two worlds apart. "Gentlemen," Lucinda started. Her voice had a fake warmth she used when she gave orders she knew would be obeyed. "I have a special job for you. My daughter Catherine needs physical help. She has become weak and lazy, not fit for the duties she will one day have as the lady of this house. You will watch over her work every day in the East Barn. You will make sure she works from sunrise to sunset. You will write down her progress in a book I will give you. And you will not speak of this to anyone, or you will be punished. I trust I do not need to explain." The threat was clear without being said. Not obeying meant the whip. It meant being sold to the terrible sugar plantations in Louisiana, or worse. But there was something in Lucinda's eyes that was more than the usual cruelty of an owner. There was a look of excitement, like she was about to start an experiment and could not wait to see the results. Catherine herself was not asked about this plan. On the morning of March 17th, her mother's personal maid led her from her room to the barn. She was still in her nightgown, with a simple work dress Lucinda had picked out over it. The girl's face showed no shock, just a deep sadness. It seemed this was just the latest in a long line of humiliations from her mother. The first morning in the barn started with a cold precision that felt planned, as if Lucinda had mapped out every detail of Catherine's suffering. Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel had been given exact orders. Catherine had to grind corn with a heavy stone mill by hand. She had to carry 50-pound sacks of grain from one side of the barn to the other, and she had to split firewood until her hands were covered in blisters. The work was not designed to get things done, but to cause total exhaustion. Each task was set to push her body past its limits. The barn made every sound louder. The grinding of the stone mill echoed in the high ceiling. Catherine's heavy breathing became a rhythm for the barn. The creaking of the old wood seemed to mark the time. Like a slow, painful clock, each groan of the building was a reminder of another hour passing in the same terrible way. What Samuel noticed most in those first days was Catherine's silence. She did not cry. She did not beg. She did not even talk except to ask for water, which they were told to give her only in small amounts. Her face was blank as she worked. It was as if she had left her own body and was watching from far away. Lucinda came every afternoon at exactly 3:00. Her skirts rustled on the barn floor as she walked around her daughter like a farmer checking animals. She held a leather book. In it, she wrote down measurements and notes with the coldness of a scientist. Weight estimated 195 pounds, she wrote on March 20th. Face is still puffy, arms seem slightly smaller. Hands are getting rough, which is a shame but needed. Her mood is quiet as it should be. The treatment is working as planned. But Lucinda's diary only told one side of the story. She did not write about the private talks she was having with other plantation wives. These women also had daughters they saw as problems. Mrs. Helena Cartwright's daughter, Rebecca, had been caught reading anti-slavery pamphlets from the North. Mrs. Beatrice Singleton's daughter, Emma, had turned down 3 good marriage offers, saying she wanted to study medicine. Mrs. Constance Whitfield's daughter, Sarah, had been found secretly teaching enslaved children how to read. These women visited the Kellerman estate for all sorts of reasons, afternoon tea, to talk about gardens, or to plan parties. But they always asked to see the barn. Lucinda always said yes, leading them through the oak trees to see Catherine's change. "You see," Lucinda would say, pointing to her daughter's tired body, "the body listens to discipline just like the soul. 3 weeks of hard work and the extra weight is already melting off. Think of what 3 months could do, 6 months, a year." The visitors took notes. They asked about her methods, how long it took, and who watched her. They asked about her diet and if Catherine was allowed any rest. Lucinda answered every question like a scientist sharing a new discovery. "No rest," she confirmed. "Rest is what made her this way. Laziness and self-indulgence are sisters. They make our daughters weak. Here, Catherine learns the value of work. She learns that comfort must be earned. She learns that her body is not hers to ruin." By April, the first of the other girls arrived. Rebecca Cartwright was taken to a barn on her family's land. 3 enslaved men were given the same orders as Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel. Emma Singleton was next, 2 weeks later. Then came Sarah Whitfield. Each family changed the plan a little, but the main idea was the same: isolation, hard work, and the breaking of a spirit, all hidden as physical improvement. What none of these mothers expected was that their daughters might find ways to talk to each other. The plantations were far apart, but enslaved workers moved between them, carrying news. Daniel was sometimes sent to take grain to other estates. He started to see a pattern. Barns that were once used for storage were now locked. Young white women who used to be at all the parties were suddenly gone. Their mothers said they were sick or visiting family. "There are others," Daniel whispered to Samuel one night as they locked the barn. "I saw them, girls working just like Catherine, looking just as tired, just as afraid." Samuel felt a cold dread in his stomach. This was not just one person's cruelty. It was a system. It was being built, and it was growing. Inside the barn, something strange was happening to Catherine. The work was awful, meant to crush her. But it was also the first time in years she was free from her mother's constant judging and criticism. In the barn, she was just a person doing a job. There were no mirrors to show her how she failed to be perfect. There were no parties where she was shown off as her mother's great disappointment. And there were Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel. They treated her with a quiet respect that shocked her. They did not make fun of her size. They did not talk about how she looked. When she had trouble with a heavy sack, Joshua would quietly move to take some of the weight without making it obvious. When her hands bled, Samuel brought her clean cloths and showed her how to wrap them. When she nearly fell from being so tired, Daniel caught her and held her steady without judgment. The first time Catherine spoke about something other than water was on April 8th. It was 6 weeks after she was locked in. She was resting during the short noon break. Joshua was fixing a tool nearby. "Do you hate me?" she asked in a low voice. Joshua's hands stopped. He did not look right at her. He knew that looking her in the eye could be seen as a challenge if anyone saw them. "No, miss," he said, his voice careful. "You should," Catherine said. "I'm everything you should hate, you. Our owner's daughter. I live in comfort while you suffer. I would hate me." Joshua picked his words carefully. He was a man who knew that a single wrong word could cost him his life. "Hate costs energy, miss. Energy is better used to stay alive." It was a simple answer, but it opened a door for Catherine. For the first time, she started to see the 3 men not as her mother's tools, but as people. They were trapped in the same awful system, just in very, very different ways. The talks got longer. They always spoke in careful whispers during breaks or in the early morning darkness. Catherine learned that Joshua had a wife and 2 children in the slave quarters. She learned Samuel had once lived in a city and could read and write better than most white men. She learned Daniel dreamed of a freedom he might never get. In return, the men learned about Catherine's life in the big house. It was its own kind of jail. There were endless rules about how to act and dress. She was criticized for every bite of food, every word she said. She was kept away from people her own age because her mother was too ashamed to let her be seen. "She wants me to vanish," Catherine said one morning in May. "She wants the daughter she pictured in her head, not the one she got. I think she hoped this work would kill me. Then she could tell everyone I died of some sickness and finally be free of her shame." Samuel was listening as he pretended to stack grain sacks. He felt a chill. He was starting to think the same thing. Lucinda's visits were less frequent, but when she did come, she seemed upset that Catherine was still alive. Yes, the girl was losing weight, but she was also getting stronger from the work. Her arms had muscles. Her breathing was not as heavy. She was not fading away as Lucinda had hoped. She was adapting. The entries in Lucinda Kellerman's diary turned darker as spring became summer. Her cold notes gave way to anger. Then, they turned to a cold planning that hinted she was thinking of worse things. June 3, 1843. Catherine is still heavy even with the hard work. Weight loss is small. Maybe her food must be cut more. Maybe the work needs to go into the night. I'm told the Cartwright girl is much improved. Why is Catherine different? What Lucinda did not know was that Joshua had been giving Catherine extra food from the quarters. It was not much, just enough to keep her from starving, which was making the other girls sick. He did this knowing the great risk. He was sharing food his own family needed. He did it because he saw something in Catherine that reminded him of his own daughter. He saw a basic goodness, a wish to be seen as a human and not an object. But other changes were happening, too, small shifts in the barn that no one had expected. Catherine and Joshua had started talking more freely during the long work hours. They started with short words about the tasks. This grew into talks about life, hope, and how crazy the world was. A world that valued people differently based on their skin color or their body shape. "Your mother would have me whipped just for looking you in the eye," Joshua said one afternoon. They were working together to move a broken cart. "But here, in this barn, working like this, what's the difference between us? We both bleed. We both get tired. We both want to be free from the things that tie us down." Catherine had never thought of it that way. Her prison was different from Joshua's, of course. But it was still a prison. She could not leave the barn. She could not choose what to do with her own body or her own life. She was just a problem that needed to be fixed. The first time they touched on purpose, not by accident, was in late June. Catherine was lifting a sack of grain when her legs gave out and she fell. Joshua caught her. For a second, they stood so close they could feel each other's breath. Neither of them moved. The air between them felt thick with both promise and danger. "We shouldn't," Catherine whispered, but she did not pull away. "No," Joshua agreed, "we shouldn't." But they stayed right where they were. In that barn, cut off from the world, they had made a small space. A space where the rules of the plantation world seemed far away and could be bent. What happened next was bound to happen, or maybe it was a choice they both made. They knew the danger, but they chose to connect instead of being safe. Their relationship grew in secret moments. Samuel and Daniel acted as guards without being asked. They would warn them if anyone was coming. What started as comfort grew into something deeper. It was real love, crossing a line that was impossible to cross in their world. But secrets find a way out. By the middle of July, both Samuel and Daniel knew what was happening. Neither man said anything. But they would move to give the two more privacy. They would create jobs that sent Catherine and Joshua to the back of the barn. They would look away during the short moments the TW. Found to be together. "This is going to end badly," Samuel said to Daniel one night. Catherine was back in the main house and Joshua was gone. "There is no good ending to this story." Daniel, at 16, understood how cruel the world was. He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but maybe they deserve a little happiness, even if it's short. Maybe that's all any of us get." Lucinda was busy with her growing business of fix-it barns all over the county. She did not see the change in her daughter. She was too busy writing down her methods. She wrote letters to families as far away as Alabama and Georgia. She was figuring out how much money she could make as an expert in fixing bad daughters. Her diary from July 12th shows her plans. "Interest in my treatment is better than I ever hoped. Mrs. Patricia Rutherford from Mobile has written. She wants my full plan. She has a daughter who wants to paint instead of focusing on being a proper lady. Mrs. Vivian Caldwell from Savannah asks about the results. She is worried about a daughter who is too interested in the family's money. The chance to grow this is huge. Maybe I will publish a book on the subject." The cure for female laziness through hard work, would be a good title. But while Lucinda planned her cruel empire, Catherine's body was changing in a way that had nothing to do with weight. By early August, she started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, she thought it was the bad food and being tired all the time. But when her monthly bleeding did not come, she knew what had happened. She told Joshua first. It was during a quiet moment when Samuel and Daniel were working at the other end of the barn. "I am pregnant," she whispered. Her hand went to her stomach. "It's your child." Joshua's face showed shock, then fear, and then a softness that made Catherine's eyes fill with tears. But they both knew what this meant. A pregnancy would be impossible to hide. When Lucinda found out, the punishment would be terrible. "They will kill you," Catherine said, her voice breaking. "My mother will have you killed for this, maybe all three of you, to make sure no one ever talks." Joshua took her hands. This was so dangerous but so needed. "Then we have to plan. We have time to find a way out." But a plan needed information, and information meant risk. Samuel, using his ability to read and his rare chances to be in the plantation office, started looking. He looked at sales records, property maps, and letters between plantations. He was searching for anything that showed how big Lucinda's network was, any weak spot they could use. What he found was worse than he had dreamed. Hidden in a book marked "House Costs" were notes. They suggested at least 4 other girls had gone through Lucinda's treatment before Catherine. Next to each name was a final note. Handled natural causes, or sent to family in Texas, or just resolved. "What does resolved mean?" Daniel asked, when Samuel showed him the book late one night. Samuel's face was hard. Nothing good at all. The pattern was clear. Girls who did not get better, who did not lose weight, or who fought back too much just vanished. Their families got death certificates or letters saying they were sent away. But there were no graves, no new addresses, no trail. "Catherine is in more danger than she knows," Samuel said. "Even without the baby, if her mother decides she has failed the treatment, she will just be resolved, like the others." They had to act, but any plan needed things they did not have. Money, legal papers, a way to travel. The tools for freedom were kept far away from the people who needed them most. It was Catherine who came up with the impossible idea. "My father's study," she said. "Before he died, he kept money hidden there. Papers, too, papers about the plantation. My mother never goes in that room. She locked it after he died. But I know where she hides the key." The plan they made was desperate. Their only hope was that the impossible might work. Catherine would pretend to be much sicker from the work. This would give her an excuse to be taken to the main house. During one of these trips, she would get into her father's study. She would take whatever money and papers she could find. With those, Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel would try to get fake freedom papers and a ticket north. But every part of the plan needed perfect timing and a lot of luck. The study was on the 2nd floor of the mansion. She could only get to it by passing rooms where house servants were always working. The key was hidden in Lucinda's own bedroom, inside a music box, and the timing had to be just right. Lucinda had to be busy, the servants had to be distracted, and the men in the barn had to have a story for why Catherine was allowed to leave. On August 17, 1843, they tried the first step. Catherine cried out, claiming to have sharp pains in her stomach. She was so convincing that even Samuel, who knew it was an act, felt worried. The act worked. Lucinda was annoyed by the interruption. She ordered Catherine to be taken to her room. "If she is faking, she will return to the barn tomorrow for twice the work," Lucinda said. "If she is really sick, Dr. Harrison will check on her and give her medicine." The mention of a doctor scared Catherine. Any doctor would find out she was pregnant. She had about 24 hours. She had to get into the study and get back to the barn before her secret was found out. That night, Lucinda went to a dinner party at another plantation. Catherine waited for the house to get quiet. She knew the schedule. The servants finished their work by 9:00. Her mother's maid went to bed by 10:00. The house would be still until the kitchen staff started at 5:00 in the morning. She had 7 hours. The music box was right where she remembered it, on Lucinda's dressing table. Catherine's hands shook as she opened it. The tiny, tinkling song seemed deafeningly loud in the quiet house. The key was there, small and iron on a faded ribbon. Her father's study smelled like old leather and tobacco. The smells brought back memories of a time before her life went wrong, before her father's strange death, before her mother's cruelty took over. Catherine let herself cry for 1 second before she focused. The money was in a fake bottom of a desk drawer just where her father had shown her. $300. It was a fortune. It could buy them a ride north and maybe a new life. But it was the papers she found that truly stunned her. Letters, dozens of them, from 1839. Letters from her father to a lawyer in Philadelphia. He was planning to free every enslaved person on the Kellerman plantation. The letters showed his growing horror at slavery, his moral change, his plan to do the right thing no matter the cost. And one last letter not sealed. It was to Catherine. My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, I have failed. I did not find the courage I needed in life. Your mother will say I died of heart failure, and maybe I did. My heart failed to be brave enough to stand up to the evil I have been a part of. I cannot free those I have enslaved while I am alive. Your mother will use the law to stop me. But I can make sure that when I die, the tools for their freedom are here. The money in this drawer is for you, but I hope you will use it as I could not. To help those who deserve freedom. Forgive me for being a coward. Forgive me for leaving you alone with your mother's hate. You deserved a better father. They deserved a better owner. Catherine stood in the dark room, tears blurring her father's words. He had not died of heart failure. He had taken his own life. He was crushed by guilt and the fact that he could not change the system. And Lucinda had hidden this. She burned his other letter. She locked away the proof. Catherine took the money and the letters, but she found one more thing, her father's will. It had never been filed with the court. In it, he left the plantation not to Lucinda but to Catherine, and it clearly said that all enslaved people were to be freed upon his death. Lucinda had hidden this paper. She kept running the plantation as if it were hers. She had been faking her dead husband's name on papers to keep control. This was the weapon they needed. This was proof that could ruin Lucinda. It could challenge her power. But using it meant getting to the legal system. It meant finding lawyers and courts that would never listen to an enslaved man or to a heavy daughter her mother called crazy. Catherine got back to her room just as the sun was coming up. She hid the documents and money in the lining of an old winter coat. She knew Lucinda would never look there in the summer. The next morning, she said she felt better and was ready to go back to the barn. Lucinda was suspicious, but she had no proof. She agreed, but gave Catherine a warning that made her blood run cold. Dr. Harrison will visit the barn tomorrow to check on you, Lucinda announced. He is worried the work is too much. I told him you are doing wonderfully. I expect you to tell him the same. Any other story will lead to results you will not like. The doctor's visit meant they would be found out. It meant the end. They had maybe 24 hours to act. When Catherine got back to the barn and showed them what she found, the four of them knew there was no going back. They had tools that could break Lucinda's power, but using those tools meant escaping the plantation. It meant reaching people who might listen, and it meant staying alive long enough to tell the story. We leave tonight, Joshua said. His voice was firm even though their situation was hopeless. All four of us, we take the money, the documents, and we run. They will hunt us, Samuel warned. Every slave patrol in Mississippi will be looking for 3 runaway men and a white woman. We won't make it 10 miles. But Catherine had an idea born from watching her mother twist how things look. Ed, we will not be running. We will be traveling. I will be a widow, traveling with my servants to visit family in Kentucky. The money will buy fake travel papers from a man in Natchez. My father's letters will prove who I am if we're stopped. We just need to get to the river and get on a steamboat heading north. It was a plan with 1,000 ways to fail, but it was the only plan they had. They spent the rest of the day getting ready. Each one had a job to do without making anyone suspicious. It was a stressful dance, acting normal while filled with terror. Samuel's job was the most dangerous. He had to go into Natchez after dark to find a forger known as Crawford. He was a free black man who worked out of a warehouse near the river. His papers were expensive. Finding him meant walking through a city that was very dangerous for any black person after dark. Samuel would take $50 of Catherine's money. It was enough to buy the papers, but not so much that they would be ruined if he was caught. Joshua gathered supplies for the trip, food that wouldn't spoil, clothes for travel, and weapons. He got 2 knives from the tool shed. He hid them in the rafters of the barn. They were not much against guns, but they were something. Daniel's job was to create a cover story. He would stay in the barn after the others left. He would make it look like Catherine was still trapped there. In the morning, when Lucinda came and found Catherine gone, Daniel would say she escaped during the night. He would say she attacked him and ran off alone. It was a story that would get him punished, maybe badly, but it would buy the others time. The 16-year-old boy accepted this job with a sadness that broke Catherine's heart. "I'll say she threatened me with a tool," Daniel said, planning his story. "That she was crazy, that I was scared for my life. They'll believe a white woman could scare me. They'll believe I'm a coward, let them." Catherine spent the afternoon writing letters. One was to her father, even though he'd never read it. She told him she found his will and understood his final act. One was to Daniel, thanking him for his sacrifice. She promised that if she lived, she would come back for him. And one was to her mother. She did not plan to send this one. In it, she listed every cruel act, every time Lucinda had chosen image over love, control over kindness. "I want her to know," Catherine said, sealing the last letter. "Even if we fail, even if they kill us, I want her to know that I saw her for what she really is. Not a mother, not even a person, just an empty shell in a fancy dress who thinks cruelty is strength." Just when it seems the story can't get any darker, the horror in Mississippi grows. If this story is sending a shiver down your spine, please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos. You won't want to miss what happens next, because what was waiting for them in Natchez was about to change everything. Samuel left for Natchez as the sun went down. He slipped off the plantation like a shadow. The 8-mile walk would take him 3 hours. He followed paths that stayed away from the main roads and the patrols. In the barn, Catherine, Joshua, and Daniel waited. The silence was heavy. Every minute felt like an hour. They had done all they could, but they couldn't control the 1,000 things that could go wrong. What if Samuel couldn't find the forger? What if the papers weren't good enough? What if Lucinda decided to check the barn early? It was during this long wait that Joshua finally said what they were all thinking. "If we're caught, they will kill me. Samuel and Daniel, too, they'll make an example of us. But you, Catherine, they might let you live. If it comes to that, if we're trapped, you have to deny everything. Say we kidnapped you. Say we forced you. Save yourself." Catherine's answer was fast and strong. "I will not. We live through this together or we fail together. I have spent my whole life being told what to do, who to be. This is the first choice that is all mine. I choose you. I choose this, no matter what." The words hung in the air. It was a promise and a goodbye. Joshua pulled her close. They stood together in the dark, feeling the weight of the impossible choice they had made. Daniel watched from the door. He felt tears. He was seeing something that shouldn't exist in their world, real love crossing a line that society was built to prevent. It was beautiful and terrible, like seeing a flower grow in a fire. Samuel got back just before midnight. The look on his face told them he had done it. "Crawford sends his hellos," he said. He pulled a packet of papers from his shirt. "Travel papers for Mrs. Catherine Kellerman, a widow traveling with 3 servants to Louisville, Kentucky. He even included letters for a hotel in Natchez and a ticket for the steamboat. It cost all $50, but his work is good. The papers will pass unless someone looks too hard." They checked the papers by candlelit. The forgery was amazing. It had official-looking seals and names that meant nothing but looked real. Catherine was listed as the widow of James Kellerman, who had died of yellow fever. Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel were listed as her property, worth $3,000. They were being taken north to be sold to pay her dead husband's debts. The sadness of the papers was clear. To travel as free people would be an instant alarm, but to travel as an owner and her property, they could pass through checkpoints. The very system that trapped them would be their key to escape. "We leave in 2 hours, Catherine said. "The roads will be quietest between 2:00 and 4:00 in the morning. We walk to Natchez, staying off the main road. At sunrise, we go to the steamboat office. We'll act like travelers who arrived late and need to get on the first boat heading north." The plan was good, but as they got ready to leave, Daniel's voice stopped them. "Miss Catherine, there's something you need to know, something I saw but didn't talk about." They turned. The boy's face showed a fear that was deeper than their current danger. "The other girls," Daniel said slowly. "The ones in the barns on the other plantations. I was sent to the Cartwright place last week with grain. The barn where Miss Rebecca was kept. It was empty, not just empty of her. It was cleaned, scrubbed out like someone was hiding proof. I asked one of the Cartwright workers what happened to the girl. He wouldn't say, but he looked at me with such pity. That kind of look. It only means one thing." The truth settled on them like a heavy blanket. Rebecca Cartwright, the first girl to get Lucinda's treatment, was gone, not sent away. Gone in a way that meant the barn had to be scrubbed clean. "How many?" Catherine whispered. "How many others?" "I don't know for sure," Daniel said, "but I saw 3 barns that were emptied and cleaned. Cartwright, Singleton, and Whitfield. All of them started after your mother visited. All of them ended the same way. Catherine felt sick. Her mother hadn't just been testing her plan on her. She had created a system that was murdering young women all over the county, all for the sake of looking perfect. And the families, so desperate to fix their daughters, had been part of their deaths. "We can't just save ourselves," Catherine said. Her voice shook with anger and pain. "We have to expose this, all of it, the treatments, the deaths, everything." But Joshua shook his head, his face full of pain. "Catherine, if we try to expose this before we are safe, we will be dead before anyone listens. We have to survive first. We have to get to people who have the power to look into this. Then and only then can we get justice." He was right, and Catherine knew it. But knowing they were leaving Daniel behind, that other girls might be dying even as they ran, made her feel like she was part of the evil. They gathered their few supplies, the papers, the rest of the money, the knives, and a little food. Catherine took one last thing, the letter she wrote to her mother. She wouldn't send it, but she would keep it, a record of everything Lucinda had done. The goodbye to Daniel was fast. Anything longer would have broken them all. The boy stood at the barn door. Catherine hugged him, this child who was giving up his safety for them. "I will come back for you," she promised. "When we are safe, when we have the power, I will come back. You won't be forgotten." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. He watched the three of them slip into the night, vanishing into the same oak trees that had hidden so many secrets. The walk to Natchez took 4 hours, not 3. They moved slowly, stopping all the time to listen for patrols. There was no moon, which hid them but made the path hard. Catherine was not used to walking so far. She struggled, but she kept going, pushed by fear and a new strength. They reached the edge of Natchez just as the sky turned gray. The city was waking up. Workers headed to the docks. Shop owners opened their doors. Catherine used a little of their water to wash her face. She tried to look like a proper widow, not a runaway who had been in the woods all night. The steamboat office was right on the water. A clerk sat at a desk, looking at lists. He looked up as they came in. His face changed from polite to surprised as he saw the strange group, a young, wealthy-looking woman and 3 enslaved men. "Good morning, madam," the clerk said. His voice was smooth, trained to serve the rich. "How can I help you?" Catherine had practiced this moment 100 times, but her voice almost failed. She forced herself to look the clerk in the eye, trying to copy her mother's bossy confidence. "I need to get to Louisville on the first boat," she said. She put the fake papers on the desk. "My servants and I have had a hard trip. I want to be on my way as fast as possible." The clerk looked at the papers. Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Behind her, Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel stood with their heads bowed, playing their parts. "The Morning Star leaves at 8:00, the clerk said at last. "I can get you a private cabin, madam, and spots for your property in the cargo hold." "That will be fine," Catherine said, though the word property made her sick. She counted out the money. The clerk's face stayed blank as he took it. "Welcome aboard the Morning Star, Mrs. Kellerman," he said, handing her the tickets. "I hope your trip is a peaceful one." They had done it. In less than 3 hours, they would be on a boat heading north, away from Mississippi, away from Lucinda, away from the barn. Catherine let herself feel a tiny bit of hope. But as they left the office and walked to the dock, Samuel touched her arm. "Miss Catherine," he whispered, "we're being watched." She followed his eyes. A man was standing near a warehouse. He was dressed like a river worker, but he was standing too still, watching them too closely. As she looked at him, he turned and walked quickly toward the main street. "Slave catcher," Joshua breathed. "He saw something. We have to get on board now." They hurried to the ramp, but moving fast just made more people look. Other workers stopped talking as the strange group hurried past. Catherine felt all the eyes on her, all the questions. The Morning Star's captain stood at the top of the ramp, checking tickets. He was an older man with a worn face. His eyes got small as they walked up. "Mrs. Kellerman?" he asked, looking at her ticket. "You're traveling alone with 3 male servants." "My husband died," Catherine said. Her voice was steady, but she was terrified. "I'm going back to my family in Kentucky. These men are being sold to pay his debts." The captain's eyes moved to Joshua, then Samuel, then Daniel. A look passed over his face. It was suspicion. Catherine felt it. "Get on board quickly," he said. "We leave in 1 hour." They climbed the ramp. Catherine did not let herself look back at Natchez. When she finally did, her blood turned to ice. The man who was watching them was now talking to 2 other men. One of them was on a horse. The rider turned his horse and galloped down the road back toward the plantations. "They're going to get my mother," Catherine said. "We have 1 hour before she gets here, before she proves I'm not a widow, that these papers are fake, and that we are runaways." Joshua's jaw was tight. "Then we pray this captain cares more about his schedule than he cares about helping a plantation owner." They were shown to Catherine's cabin. It was small, but clean. Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel were told to go to the cargo hold, but the crewman who led them seemed busy and let them stay near Catherine's cabin for a minute. "Something's wrong," Samuel said quietly. "The crew knows something. I can see it in their faces." Time moved slowly. Catherine watched out the small window. She saw cargo being loaded. She saw passengers get on. The sun got higher. Every minute brought them closer to leaving, but also closer to being caught. At 7:30, there was a noise on the dock. Lucinda was there, and she was not alone. Behind her carriage were 3 men on horses. One was the county sheriff. The others were plantation workers with rifles. Catherine's mother got out of the carriage. Her face was a mask of cold anger. She walked right up to the captain. Catherine couldn't hear, but she could see her mother's hands, pointing and demanding. The captain shook his head. Lucinda's voice got louder, carrying over the water. "That girl is my daughter, and those men are stolen property." The captain let Lucinda on the boat. It was over. Catherine heard the footsteps on the deck. She heard the voices get louder. The door to her cabin flew open. Lucinda stood there. Behind her were Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel, held at gunpoint by the sheriff's men. "Did you really think you could escape?" Lucinda's voice was quiet, which was scarier than a scream. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" Catherine stood up. For the first time, she felt no fear of her mother, only anger. "I found Father's will. I know what you did. You stole this plantation. You faked his name. You built your world on lies and murder." Lucinda's face did not change. "Your father was a weak man. He would have ruined this family. I did what I had to do." "You killed those girls," Catherine said. "Rebecca, Emma, Sarah, how many others? How many daughters died in those barns while you wrote in your journal like a scientist?" For the first time, something changed in Lucinda's eyes. Not regret, just the knowledge that Catherine knew too much. "The treatment worked," Lucinda said coldly. "Some of them were just too weak to survive it. Their families understood. They were thankful I got rid of the evidence for them." The casual way she admitted to murder, the total lack of a soul, was terrifying. Catherine knew then that her mother was not just cruel. She was something empty, a hole wrapped in a nice dress. "You will come back with me," Lucinda said. "These men will be hanged for stealing. The papers you took will be burned, and you will finish your treatment, because you are carrying the proof of your shame right inside you." Lucinda knew about the pregnancy. "Dr. Harrison checked your room this morning," Lucinda said, reading Catherine's face. "He found things that made him suspicious. He confirmed it. So you see, my dear, your problem is much worse than just running away." Joshua jumped forward. The sheriff's man hit him with his rifle. Joshua fell to his knees, blood pouring from his face. "Stop!" Catherine screamed. "I'll go with you, just don't hurt them." "Oh, they will be hurt," Lucinda said. "They will be an example, but first they will tell me who else knows about your father's will, who else saw those papers." It was Samuel who spoke. His voice was clear, even though he was terrified. "Many people know. We sent copies to lawyers in Philadelphia, to abolitionists in Boston, to newspapers in New York. Even if you kill us, the truth is already out." It was a lie, a desperate, brave lie, but he said it with such power that Lucinda, for the first time, looked unsure. "You are slaves who can't read," she said, but her voice was shaky. "I can read and write better than most men in this county," Samuel shot back. "And I spent 3 weeks copying every paper in your office while you were planning your torture. Every fake signature, every false death record, every letter about how to get rid of the bodies. It's all copied. It's all been sent north. It's all waiting to be printed." It was not true, but watching her mother's face change from anger to fear, Catherine knew what Samuel was doing. He was buying them time. He was making Lucinda doubt. The sheriff stepped forward, looking worried. "Mrs. Kellerman, if there is proof of a crime, if papers were sent." "There are no papers," Lucinda snapped. "This slave is lying to save his skin." But Catherine saw the fear in her mother's eyes. Lucinda was weighing the risk. If even a small part of Samuel's story was true, it would ruin her. Murder could be hidden in Mississippi, but not if northern newspapers started asking questions. "Prove it," Lucinda demanded. Samuel looked right at her. The proof will arrive when the investigators do. Maybe in weeks, maybe in days, but they will come. They all stood there for a long moment. Then Lucinda made her choice. Sheriff, take them all, lock them in the county jail until we fix this. If there are papers, we will find them. If not, these men will hang for their lies. As they were led off the boat, Catherine locked eyes with Joshua. In that one look she saw goodbye. They both knew what county jail meant. It meant torture, it meant death. But as they walked down the ramp, Catherine felt something change. She was 19, pregnant, and being arrested by her own mother. Yet for the first time she had made her own choices. She had loved who she wanted. She had fought for freedom. She had seen real courage. The jail was a stone building that smelled like damp earth and fear. They were split up right away. Catherine was put in a small cell. Joshua, Samuel, and Daniel were taken to the basement, where enslaved prisoners were kept. Lucinda visited Catherine that night. She brought no food, just her cold stare. "You have cost me a lot," Lucinda said. "The sheriff is asking questions. Other families are nervous. You have made things difficult." "Good," Catherine said. "I hope I have ruined everything you built." Lucinda's smile was awful. "You have only ruined yourself. By tomorrow, I will have the truth from those men. By next week, they will be dead and in graves no one will ever find. And you, daughter, will go back to the barn until your problem is gone. Dr. Harrison has agreed to watch over you to make sure nothing goes wrong." The meaning was clear. The pregnancy would be ended. Catherine would either live through it or she would be resolved like the other girls. "You can't keep doing this," Catherine said. "Someone will find out." "Who?" Lucinda asked. "The sheriff who needs my family's money, the doctors who I pay, the families who are just as guilty. No one is coming to save you, Catherine. There is only me and what I decide." She left. Catherine was alone in the dark, feeling the weight of her failure. 3 days passed. Catherine heard nothing. The guards would not answer her. She was fed just enough to live, bread and water once a day. On the 4th day, Daniel appeared at her window. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but he was alive. "Miss Catherine," he whispered, "listen, we don't have much time." "Where are Joshua and Samuel?" Catherine asked, grabbing the bars. Daniel's face told her the answer. "Joshua is gone. They took him 2 nights ago, said he was being moved. But we know what that means. Samuel is alive, but just barely. They've been questioning him." The pain was sharp and sudden. Joshua was dead. The father of her child, the man who showed her what bravery was gone. "I'm so sorry," Daniel cried, tears on his hurt face. "But Samuel, before they hurt him too bad." He did something. He really did send a letter north, not all the papers, like he said, but one letter to an abolitionist in Pennsylvania. He sent it weeks ago when he first thought your mother was up to something. He told them everything. The barns, the missing girls, all of it. A small, desperate hope lit up in Catherine. Will they come? Will they believe him? "I don't know," Daniel said. "But Miss Catherine, you have to live until they do. Whatever your mother plans, you have to survive. Because if investigators come and you're dead, there's no one left to talk. You are the only witness they can't just ignore." He was right. Her life wasn't just about her anymore. It was about justice for Rebecca, Emma, Sarah, and the others. It was about tearing down the world Lucinda had built. "How do I survive?" she asked. "Agree to everything," Daniel said. "Tell her you'll obey, make her think you're broken, and wait." That night when Lucinda visited, Catherine played the part. She cried. She begged for forgiveness. She promised to obey. The act was easy because the tears were real even if they came from anger, not fear. Lucinda, happy that her daughter was finally crushed, had Catherine moved back to the estate. Not to the barn, but to a locked room in the house. Dr. Harrison could care for her there. The next weeks were a blur of loneliness and fear. Catherine's pregnancy continued. Dr. Harrison visited. His checks were cold and silent. He never said the words, but Catherine knew the plan. She would have the baby. Then the baby would be taken and disposed of. Catherine would be told she had a stillbirth. But in late October, something changed. Dr. Harrison showed up and he seemed rushed. Catherine heard yelling downstairs. Lucinda's voice had a panic in it that Catherine had never heard. The next morning, Catherine was moved again. She was put in a carriage and sent to Natchez. No one told her why. At the courthouse, she was led into a room. 2 men in suits were waiting. They said they were investigators from the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society. They were here to look into claims from a letter they had received. "Mrs. Kellerman has been very helpful," one man said, but his voice sounded like he didn't believe it. But we need to talk to other witnesses. You are Catherine Kellerman, correct? Catherine looked at her mother. Lucinda sat stiff in her chair, her face a mask of rage. Then Catherine looked back at the men and made her choice. I am, she said, and I have a lot to tell you. Her story took hours. Catherine explained everything. The barn, the forced work, the girls who vanished, her father's hidden will, the fake signatures, the murders. When Catherine mentioned her pregnancy and that Joshua had been killed, one investigator's face grew dark. The man was killed with no trial. My mother ordered it, Catherine said. The sheriff did it. His body was never returned. Lucinda was silent. Her lawyer whispered in her ear. But as the proof piled up, her confidence broke. Papers were found. Samuel, barely alive, was brought in to speak. Daniel backed up every word. The trial was the biggest scandal Mississippi had ever seen. Lucinda Kellerman was charged with murder, forgery, and theft. The other rich families who used the treatment were investigated. Some ran. Others burned their records and claimed they knew nothing. Lucinda was found guilty in January 1844. She was sent to prison for life. She died there 2 years later. Her body was buried in a grave with no name. Catherine had her baby, a son, in February 1844. She named him Thomas Joshua. She honored her father and the man she had loved. Using her father's real will, she took over the Kellerman plantation. The first thing she did was begin the process of freeing every enslaved person on the property. Samuel recovered. He stayed on the plantation as a paid worker helping Catherine. Daniel stayed too, and he finally got the education he had been denied. Together, they built something new, a Mississippi plantation run without slave labor by the very people who had once been property. The barn where Catherine was jailed was torn down in 1844. In the ground beneath it, they found remains. 7 sets of bones in shallow graves. 7 girls who did not survive Lucinda's treatment. 7 daughters whose families chose to forget them rather than ask hard questions. Catherine made sure each girl was given a proper burial, their names carved in stone, their stories told. Rebecca Cartwright, Emma Singleton, Sarah Whitfield, and 4 others, Abigail Henderson, Margaret Ashworth, Virginia Thorne, and Lilina Pewitt. This mystery reveals that the worst horrors aren't ghosts, they are human. They come from an obsession with how things look, from treating people as worthless, and from systems that protect evil when it's dressed in fine clothes. What are your thoughts on this story? Do you think the full truth came out? Let me know in the comments. If you want more dark histories like this one, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos. The past is full of secrets and some are darker than we can even guess. See you next time.